Hey guys, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Chris podcast. And this week we are truly honored to have one of the best songwriters around here on the show. His name is Bernie Nelson, and I'm going to tell you a lot more about this phenomenal singer-songwriter. Bernie Nelson has been a well-respected fixture on the streets of Music Row, Nashville, Tennessee for well over 30 years. As a hit songwriter, Bernie's songs have sold in excess of 30 million copies, with multi-platinum cuts on such artists as Randy Travis, Trace Atkins, Kenny Chesney, and the legendary Conway Twitty. He has had successful radio hits on country greats like John Anderson, Neil McCoy, Pam Tillis, and Confederate Railroad. His country standard, Daddy Never Was the Cadillac Kind, was a chart-topping hit for Confederate Railroad and is still one of the most played songs on country radio with over 3 million airplays. It has certainly stood the test of time. Bernie was raised in mid-Michigan and was inducted into the Michigan Country Music Hall of Fame. He then relocated to the hill country of Texas and has quickly become a sought-after performer all over the great state of Texas. In Texas, he has had multiple number one songs on the radio charts, with hits from Kyle Park, Kinfo, and Case Harden. His rich country voice has a uniqueness that is all its own. Bernie has shared the stage with the likes of Guy Clark, Steve Earle, John Prine, Michael Martin Murphey, Garth Brooks, Alabama, and many, many more. Bernie Nelson's songs are both timely and timeless. And guys, we were super thrilled to get to chat with Bernie about growing up first in Alaska and then Michigan, how he entered the music industry, how he made his way to Nashville, and then, of course, further on down the line over here to Texas. The legendary Russell Smith's influence on him, his mentors as a songwriter. We talked about the story behind some of his hits, his book, which we have right here with us, his latest album, Stockyard Cadillac, his next single, which is due out soon, called Matthew, Mark, and Luckenbach, his best songwriting advice, and so much more. And he shared not one, but 2 live performances with us today, including his huge country hit, Daddy Never Was the Cadillac Kind. Guys, we're super excited to talk to the one and only, the legendary Bernie Nelson. Y'all check it out.
Hey, everybody, I'm Marty Dodson. Thanks for tuning in to Boston Chris Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it.
Hey guys, Boston Chris here with another great episode of the Boston Chris Podcast, and we are absolutely humbled to have an absolute legend in the world of songwriting. Mr. Bernie Nelson is with us today on the show. Bernie, how you doing today, my man?
I'm good. I did a radio show when I first came to Texas, and it was so funny. The guy, he read my bio and everything, and he said, "We're here with the incredible Bernie Sanders." And I said, I don't drive a Prius, but let's back that one up a little bit. And he felt so bad,
Oh, man. Well, maybe you should start by driving a Prius then, just to kind of own it a little bit more.
I know. I do like the feel the burn thing. I use that a lot. So.
It's perfect, right? It works in music big time.
Yes.
Speaking of music, you've shared a couple of songs with us that we're going to show the folks out there. And the first one is called Make It Back to Texas, which was one of your Texas singles recently. Can you tell us a little bit about this song before we play it?
I had a buddy of mine. He was from Dallas, moved to Nashville, got a few cuts and stuff, got into building houses, but we've stayed friends for 30, 40 years. And we wrote that song at one of the houses he built back in Nashville. And he knew more about Texas than I did at the time because I'd been through Texas a lot, but being from Texas, I just tapped him for a lot of the information. I actually had to learn how to say cabrito, so...
Yeah, you have to learn a lot about how to say certain things down here. I'm from Massachusetts, so it's probably a little harder for me. Yeah. I don't know.
Like Bernie and what's the other one? There's just so many, like Seguin.
Green Hall. It's not spelled like that at all.
That way, we got words like Demumbrian and Murfreesboro and all that stuff. So. It's just learning the new terminology.
That's
I love. I haven't been to a place in Texas I wasn't, in awe of. So
Well, we're excited to show a couple of songs to the folks out there from the one and only Bernie Nelson. This is the first one. Again, it's called Make It Back to Texas. Y'all check it out.
Hey, baby, thanks for the postcard. It sure looks cool in L.A. What with the stars and the ocean, girl, there ain't no wonder that you up and moved away. Back here in San Marcos, watching the sun go down, where there ain't no smog and there ain't much traffic, it'll probably just slow you down. And you know I'll be right here if you ever make it back to Texas. Your mama says you're doing all right, and says you're making new friends, but that you ain't made church in a month of Sundays. Oh, baby, that just ain't Christian. And round here in Hayes County, we're hell on Saturday night, and next morning, drunk or sober, we're singing in the choir Rock of Ages, and I saw the light. And you know I'll be right here if you ever make it back to Texas. And we to the Guadalupe, wear cowboy boots, and baby, they just ain't for show. And Shining Bach beers I would drink around here, except for an occasional Cuervo, 'cause that's how we roll back here in Texas. And you know we still play Bob Wills in the Rose of San Antonio. Down at Green Hall, we have a ball, ain't nothing like a little caprito. Yeah, that's how we roll back here in Texas. And I'll be right here, if you ever make it back to Texas. Come on back, baby, we'll be right here where you left us. Come on down to Luckenbach, Conroe, Texas, up in the Panhandle. Come out to Terralinguas sometime and hang out with me and the hippies. Or better yet, just stay right where you are, because we'll be just fine and dandy without you.
All right, so we are back with the one and only not Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Nelson, but we are still feeling the burn today, as Bernie put it so eloquently earlier. What are you drinking today? That's always our first question. What are your favorite drinks?
Today, I was out in the sun a lot today. It's still toasty out. It was nice this morning, about 58. I don't know if you got all that. But it got up to about 90 degrees. It's got a little Pedialyte in it and some I think some kind of sparkling water. Just kind of recharges me and stuff. So
Yeah, I think we're going through our fourth Indian summer right now, right, in Texas?
crazy. I have green grass in October coming up. It's just nuts. So I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's been a weird summer, to be fair. I feel like it started late, which worries me because that means it might end late, and I don't need a late ending summer.
No, there was a change this morning in the weather, and it felt really good to see a hint of fall coming on. So
yeah, I think it's that hurricane to our east that's doing all that to us right now, lowering the temps and stuff.
you know what? I was going to tell you on Make It Back to Texas. On the tail end of it, I was in the studio, and I was just tagging and, hey, baby, come down to Luckenbach. Hey, baby, catch us out in Terralingo and stuff. And then there was just this dead air, and I started singing right off the top of Viva Terlingua with pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, pick, pick, pick. So I did a show with Gary P. Nunn a couple of years ago, and I told him what I'd done. And I asked him the story behind it. And they'd been up all night long watching My Fair Lady and got a little bit intoxicated. And in Luckenbach, especially back then, chickens were everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
and they had microphones hung up on the trees and stuff to do this live taping. So the chickens were squawking, and they started singing "Pick a Little Talk, Little Pick a Little Talk," and that's where all that came from on the Jerry Jeff Walker Viva Tulingua record. So I stole it and borrowed it from Gary P. Nunn and Jerry Jeff. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's when it's not stealing, it's flattering, right? You're flattering them. That's what that is, quote unquote, right? So let's talk about your beginnings. You, the Bernie Nelson experience started in Alaska, right? And then moved over to Michigan. Is that true?
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force. We were born in the territory. You can do the math on that if you want to.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
I always tell the young kids I wasn't born in the United States, and they say, "Oh, where were you born?" And I say Alaska, and they're like, "Well, that's the United States." I said, "Well, not at the time,"
No,
and they don't
not
get
that
it.
wasn't.
You know?
Yeah.
No. So it became statehood in '59. So, but Daddy was, Air Force. We moved down to Michigan, where they were from, Mom and Dad. And I went through high school, and then I just hit the road from there, right out of high school, and pretty much I never went back.
Awesome stuff. I had a feeling it was military involvement, and I love, obviously telling the story behind military stuff because you just never know. I talked to a lady recently who was born in Korea, not North Korea, not South Korea. She was born in Korea. And, of course, that country does not exist anymore. So now when she tries to get citizenship papers done and stuff, it's really difficult for her because she was essentially born in a place that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But so I mean, originally a Yankee. Then I guess Michigan is home for you if that's where you were raised. So we're kind of both Yankees, and I know what my experience was like trying to get it really being inundated with country music at a young age was difficult where I grew up in Massachusetts. Was it the same way for you? Like, how did you get introduced to country music from Michigan of all places?
Well, I mean, it was rampant. Mom and Dad were really big into country music, but then as a kid, a teenager growing up in Michigan, I was privy to the early Michigan rock and roll bands, Bob Seger System, Grand Funk Railroad, Ted Nugent, and their early bands before they really took off. And then we had Motown, so Motown was a big deal in Michigan too, and it was just a flux of the two, listening to Johnny Cash and Buck Owens, and then listening to everything from Creedence to Al Green and Aretha Franklin and the Stones, and a lot of that stuff just jammed together. And then somewhere, I guess, about the time I got out of high school, I was really getting into acoustic music, Jim Croce and James Taylor and John Denver. I was never a big Beatles fan, but some of their stuff, resonated with me, but more along the lines of the Eagles and Poco and Pure Prairie League, and the early writers like Lightfoot and John Denver and those people.
I love that. So, when did you kind of know that music was your calling?
I think right out of high school. I mean, I had a band and we played, and then I started doing solo gigs. But it was the solo gigs that really gave me a lot of experience for stage presence and all that stuff, and how to work a room, know what songs I could do, what songs I shouldn't do. But I really wasn't writing much until around 76, somewhere in there. I started dabbling with songwriting, and two of my songs were heard I worked for a chain of restaurants out of Lansing, Michigan, and they had restaurants all over the country. And a friend of mine knew a friend down in Muscle Shoals who went to school with in Michigan. So he mailed a cassette down to this guy in Muscle Shoals, who would go on to be a Hall of Fame writer and legendary writer. And he and another kid who would go on to be a Hall of Fame writer produced me down in Muscle Shoals in 78, 79. Mac McAnally and Robert Byrne. They wrote like two dozen roses, and Robert Byrne wrote Stranger in My House and all the Earl Thomas Conley stuff. Of course, Mac McAnally toured with Jimmy Buffett for 40 years. And that's my job back where I come from. A lot of big hits from Mac McAnally. And I being in Muscle Shoals, that led me to Rick Hall, who invented Muscle Shoals. And my first session were the Swampers. I mean, it was incredible. Barry Beckett, all the crazy musicians of Muscle Shoals back then.
Man, I'll tell you what, we've had so many, this is, I don't even know what number we're on. We're on like 25, 26, 27 on this show. And I think we've had a good 10 or 12 episodes had something to do with Muscle Shoals this season on my show. It's just remarkable how much influence Muscle Shoals in the Florence, Alabama area has on music in general, especially country music.
Jason Isabel got signed to Fame Music.
Mm-hmm.
When I was down there, we were tracking over to Sound A and B. We were in the B room, and there was this incredible guy named Delbert McClinton in the A room.
Yeah, wow.
And Delbert was, just off the charts then, and Mac McAnally, he was a prodigy, and Mac and Delbert hit it off. But Rick Hall, he was like a godfather to me, and he flew me. He called me one day and told me to come down to Muscle Shoals from Nashville, about an hour and a half drive. Didn't say why. He had a barbershop chair in his office. He put me in the chair, and he played me this new group and a new song called Mama Knows. And he said, I think we're going to name them Shenandoah. And blew me out of the water. They were so good. And I couldn't fathom why Rick Hall wanted me to hear them. But for some reason, he said, I want you to go up to Nashville and tell all the hit writers how good these guys are and to bring their best songs to our pitch meeting. And it just blew me away that this young kid was put in that position by Rick Hall, who invented Muscle Shoals, produced Aretha Franklin and Paul Simon and Bob Seger and Percy Sledge. Amazing.
How much of that did you know going into this experience? Like, how much, knowing how, like, the connections and things coming in, or did you learn all of that after you were already there?
I think really Muscle Shoals was the curtain being unveiled, the peek behind the curtain where I could see songs get written and get recorded, mm-hmm. where I'd be privy to a song before it got recorded, heard it, when it first got written. So the first song I heard Mac McAnally play was a song called Old Flame that Alabama would go on to record. Mm. And, of course, Robert and Mac were writing stuff, and Robert was on fire, and these guys were writing songs and getting cuts. So I saw the magic, and that opened the doors for me in Nashville. Mac and Robert opened the doors for me in Nashville, and I ended up signing with a company called MCA Music, ran by Jerry Crutchfield, that produced Lee Greenwood, Tanya Tucker, and the Oak Ridge Boys, amongst others. And it was a small writing house, but it had Dave Loggins, Please Come to Boston, Don Schlitz, The Gambler, golly, and Russell Smith from The Amazing Were the Masons' Third Rate Romance. And my first co-writer was Russell Smith. My first co-write song got recorded the next day by Bobby Baird.
Wow.
But I heard through the walls, we would hear songs being written like On the Other Hand, When You Say Nothing at All. Loggins would pull me in his office and play me Morning Desire and 40 Hour Week for a Living. And Russell would play me songs like Old School and Look Heart, No Hands. And of course, Schlitz and Overstreet were on fire. They were writing Deeper in a Holler and Love Without End, Amen, and Digging Up Bones. And we'd go to the Bluebird and they debut these songs, But when I got to Nashville in '84, country music was much like it's been for the last 7-8 years, kind of taboo. And now it's come back around to country music again. And my publishers were telling me I was writing songs that were too country. And my first song I got recorded was by the Whites, Ricky Skaggs' wife, Sharon White, the Whites, and Buck White. And Buck was big in Texas before he became the Whites. And my first cut, my first single, pitched it myself, wrote it myself. But then Randy Travis happened, and they were beating down my door for country songs, So the wheel turns.
It's amazing how
and
things
my advice
change,
to young, yeah, and I always tell young writers, man, good writers chase trains, and great writers write great songs, knowing full well that another train will come along in due time, And I've seen that happen with some of my young friends who they stayed in Nashville through the whole bro country scene, and they weathered it out, and they wrote great songs. And 7 years later, for example, my buddy Matt Rogers wrote a song 7 years before it got cut, but he won a Grammy with a song called "Till You Can't" for Cody Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he weathered the storm, but he wrote a song called "Girl Going Nowhere" with Ashley McBride. And those guys are both on fire now, writing great songs. And I get to write with those guys now in Nashville, and we get to write country music, so it's pretty cool.
So I did want to talk more about Russell Smith. I actually have that as a note on your outline here. And Russell Smith is obviously very well known as the lead singer of Amazing Rhythm Aces and things like that. But the songwriter is pretty unheralded, in my opinion, in the music industry. And somebody as famous as Russell Smith was with his band and all that, not too many people know that he was kind of a published songwriter, too, in the 80s. So I know you talked a little bit about his mentorship and co-writing with you. What things did you learn from Russell as a younger songwriter?
I would say Russell was probably the most influential co-writer for sure of my time in Nashville. Loggins taught me melodies, Dave Loggins, but Russell taught me. I went in there one day with a song I thought was a killer idea about people fooling around in a small town and how they pull down the shades thinking they were getting away with something, and you could see their shadows, their silhouettes. So I wanted to write a song called Silhouette Town. I thought it was really cool, and I had an opening line or two, and Russell came in and he said, man, people don't like complicated songs. People just want simple songs with melodies they can't forget and something they can attach themselves to. So it's called This Little Town. It was actually the name of Russell's last album on CBS, and I had 3 other cuts in that record. But Russell taught me to keep songs simple. He also taught me that great lyrics are just conversation put to music. And then Dave Loggins showed me where to find great melodies and how to change my melodies and not just have one set of melodies and stuff like that. And he was very bluesy. And I was one of the whitest guys in Nashville. You know? I mean, these guys was the Roy Clark of Nashville, and these guys were so soulful. But I learned a lot, and when I played Nashville in the early days. I mean, it was me and Vince Gill and Steve Earle, and we would play the Bluebird to nobody, and John and Billy Prine would come in and sit in with us, and we'd lock the front door at 1:30 and jam all night long, and go out the back door, come back in the next day and put a bottle of Jack Daniels in the well instead of paying our bar tab. But it was a really special time back then, and you watched the magic. I mean, there was so much magic going on with Schlitz and Overstreet and Tom Schuyler and Fred Knobloch. They were the foursome at the Bluebird, and my foursome was a guy named Scott Miller and Tony Arata and Jimmy Stewart. The 4 of us were called Rotter Fiasco.
Oh, man.
Jimmy wrote Brotherly Love and Look Heart No Hand.
I love Tony Arata. Huge fan.
Tony I lived in a house with Roger Brown from Menard, Texas, and it was a big house, and I was laying in bed one morning, and I heard Tony singing this song, and I got out of bed. They were having coffee, and Tony was playing a brand new song for Roger. It was The Dance. And so a few weeks later, Roger and I drove up to Goodlettsville, Texas, because there was a place up there selling exotic boots for $100. And I had the top off my Jeep, and I assumed that Roger had $100, and he assumed I had $100. And neither had a checkbook. We didn't have credit cards back then. We didn't have internet back then. We didn't have cell phones back then. And we got there, and I found this pair of elephant boots I really wanted for $100. And the sales clerk was working with some lady on selling boots, trying on boots and stuff. And I was hoping maybe I could convince this sales clerk into holding a check for me for a few weeks, letting them know that I'd had some cuts on the radio. When the sales clerk walked up to me and said, "Are you Bernie Nelson?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Man, I've heard you at the Bluebird a couple of times. I really love your music." And I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Garth Brooks." So Garth was selling cowboy boots, and he held the check we got the boots, and we invited him out to Douglas Corner to sit in with us. And the night he sat in was the first time he heard the dance ever, sitting next to me on stage.
And Tony
Crazy.
is such a humble guy, man. Such an everyday person. I love Tony to death, man. Reminds me I need to call him. He's so busy. It's hard to get in touch with him. But
Thank you. I'm holding my own and dreaming with my eyes wide open. But Tony has a song that I next time I see him, I got to ask him to play it. It's the most incredible song. It's called Unopened Letter. And if you know Tony, you understand his brain.
Yep.
He's so deep. But the song is about a letter he got from his dad after he'd passed. And he and his dad had a rough relationship. And he said he would never open that letter. Because if it's not opened up, it can say anything he wants it to say.
Right, yeah, that's incredible. Man.
Incredible.
Yeah, I got to call Tony, definitely. Thank you for mentioning his name. Man, I got to talk about my favorite Bernie Nelson song. I'd be remiss, and it's not one maybe that everybody knows, and I'm hoping to change that, but it was a Conway Twitty cut that you had, a co-write with the amazing Dave Gibson, another phenomenal songwriter that more people should know of. I would love to hear, or take us into the room as you guys are writing House on Old Lonesome Road.
You know, I lived in Colorado Springs for about 5 years, and a friend of mine lived in Garden of the Gods, and he came to Nashville to hang out for a few days, and he had his luggage, and he actually lived on Old Lonesome Road in Garden of the Gods. And I saw the address on his luggage, and I threw the idea at Dave, and we were over at Alabama's company, Maypop, and we wrote it, and we demoed it. Dave's version of it is just outstanding. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And when you hear Gibson's version of it, you understand why it got cut. But we still don't know how it got to Conway. And originally, Skip Ewing was going to cut it. Then Steve Warner was going to cut it. And what we heard was that Warner played it for Conway to show him what a great song it was, and he was going to cut it on his next session. And Conway said, you can't cut it on your next session because I'm cutting it tomorrow night. And Dave and I were at a place having adult beverages, a lot of them. And Billy Joe Walker came in. And Billy Joe Walker he produced Travis Tritt, but he was a session guitar player. And he always wore sunglasses in the middle of the night. And he told us we had the new Conway Twitty single. And we explained to him that we didn't because we didn't know anything about it. But when he told us the title of the song, and what's ironic is the gym I worked with a guy who was a graphic designer for MCA Records. And he said they called him in at 9 o'clock at night to start working on the cover. So he said, you definitely have to go. And to have a Conway Twitty cut, let alone to have Conway Twitty put one of your songs out to radio, it's just off the charts.
And it was the title cut to a record, too. Like, it was,
phenomenal.
Yeah, just unbelievable stuff. I love the song so much. And again, it was a top 40 album for Conway. It might have been his last top 40 album, if I'm not mistaken.
He followed Single Thing in Mind, which went number 2. And then in the middle of our song going up, Billboard changed some reporting issue or something like that. So each label had to drop 2 or 3 artists, and we got dropped. Conway was furious, but we made it to like 16 or 14, something like that. And
that was a single now, right?
Single, yeah. And then of course, after Conway passed, wow, 2 greatest hits albums later, we were 3-4 million in the sales.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the song was included on the 3rd greatest hits album for him, right?
And we did a tribute for Conway. I organized it with Harlan Howard and some other big people in Nashville. Anybody who'd had a cut on a single on Conway was on the show. So it was like Troy Seals and Wayne Carson.
Wow.
And Wayne sang And I See the Want To in Your Eyes. And Harlan sang Tight Fitting Jeans. And, it was just one of those magical nights. And at the end of the night, his widow, Dee Henry, came up to me and said, before he got on the bus that morning, he grabbed the guitar and played my song for her. And so it was the last song Conway ever played was my song. It was pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, my dad...
And speaking,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say Conway was my dad's favorite artist, and he had tickets to see Conway when he passed, so he never got to see him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just
Yeah.
unbelievable loss.
Daddy was just like the song says. Daddy didn't like buying things in credit, so I drove into the Chevy dealership at the end of Music Row one day, and there was this gorgeous truck sitting there, but he didn't have those stickers on the window and stuff. And I wanted to know whose truck it was because I wanted to congratulate the guy for having such a cool truck. It was brand new. And the sales clerk says it belongs to some guy named Bernie Nelson. And I said, well, that's odd. I'm Bernie Nelson. And he said, well, Waylon Merlin Littlefield over at ASCAP said you would like this truck, so he told me to clean it up for you, and he was going to tell you about it tomorrow. So I get this truck, and it's paid for. So I drive it up to Michigan to show it to Daddy. And I drive all the way up almost to Traverse City where they're camping out. And I show Daddy this truck, and he says, well, that's an incredible truck. And finally he says, well, how much are the payments? And he said, well, how can that be? And I got all bowed up, and I said, Dad, your son, and knowing what a big fan of Conway's daddy was, I said, Daddy, your son has the new Conway Twitty single. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, yep.
Okay. So I said, Daddy, your son's got the new Conway Twitty single. And Dad said, you ain't gonna lie, how much are the payments? I said, well, they're $380 a month, Dad. And I could never convince him until the song came out on the radio. Then Dad got all pretty excited about that.
That's amazing stuff. But yeah, it's always been one of my favorite Conway Twitty songs, and written by you and the incredible Dave Gibson. I appreciate you telling the story behind that one. It's just a great song.
Speaking of Dave Gibson, he hit a home run recently. Did you see that?
I have not.
Well, Dave Gibson's phone blew up a couple weeks ago on a Wednesday night because he had no idea that Toby Keith and Luke Combs have re-recorded Ships That Don't Come In.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's... Yeah.
It entered chart at 7.
Okay. Wow, that's incredible stuff.
That's a home.
Yeah. That's
and Ships That Don't Come In. It was his last session ever, and what a powerful moment that was. They put it up on the video of him recording that song on that tribute night. So kudos to Dave, and we're actually writing again for the first time in 20 years, and I'll be back there in October finishing up a couple with him. So. Oh,
man, that's exciting to hear. Very exciting. Speaking of, we've talked, a big part of the business is song plugging and making sure that the right artists hear the song at the right time. The timing is everything. But it's also about being an artist yourself. You started as an artist, as you said. You are an artist now. So how do you decide? I imagine when you're writing the songs as a published songwriter, you don't really get to decide. But is there a time when you can decide between whether you're going to cut the song yourself as an artist versus, plugging it to somebody else? And how do you make those decisions, if so?
I would say if I looked at it from, a Ray Wiley Hubbard, Jerry Jeff perspective, Billy Joe Schaefer perspective, a lot of my songs don't fit me, the way I play out and stuff. I'll play a big cut, but it's not something I would necessarily put on a record. But I try to get, I always try to feed upstream before I put it out for radio. And with Texas radio, it's been a real, I don't know if it's a challenge, but it's educational to learn the process of what works on Texas radio. I've had 7 number ones of my songs go number 1, but I've only made it into the 20s with my songs as an artist. And the more I dial into it, the more I think I'm getting more zoned into what I need to put out there to get their attention out there. And I think we're getting there. So,
yeah, and the current single is called Matthew, Mark, and Luckenbach, which I love the wordplay there. Tell us a little bit about the new single. This is the new single out at radio right now, right?
It's getting ready to go out to radio. The new single, we're just finishing up Texas Cadillacs.
Okay.
Yep. But Matthew, Mark, and Luckenbach, I can't remember the artist that Billy tours with. It's a Grammy-winning Tejano artist that Billy O'Rourke tours. But Billy and I have written some. we had a song called A Whole Lot of Nada that George Strait had on hold, and then they let it go. And Sonny Seseda just cut it recently, so hopefully they'll do something with it. But Matthew Mark and Luckenbach, I don't even remember where it came from. It just one day just rolled off my tongue, and I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea right there. So you never know who you're going to write stuff with, and I'll get in a writing room, and if they don't have something, I've got a list of about 50 ideas I get into, and you can throw an idea at 50 different writers, and they'll all pass on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day you throw it at somebody, and bing, 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 they love it, and it all comes together because it's meant to be written with that writer for whatever reason, and it goes on to do really well. So a song of mine called When Your Yellow Brick Road Turns Blue, I pitched it to several writers and nobody kind of jumped on it. And then I wrote it with my buddy Gary Vincent, and we had a single on John Anderson, and my buddy Chris Ledoux recorded it too. So,
Man, I'd love to talk more about Texas as well. You are focusing on Texas more now. How did you end up focusing more on the music scene in Texas versus staying in Nashville and focusing on that?
Well, Nashville was dried up for me. There wasn't, unless I wanted to, have to take a shower every night after writing songs, I just couldn't do that anymore. The whole bro country scene, the whole Vegematics lyrics and all that stuff, the soul was gone for several years in country music, despite the fact that songs like The House That Built Me and people like Jamie Johnson would come along and dominate all the charts and the awards and stuff, but Nashville still wouldn't let go of their bro country feeling and singles and songs and stuff. And I have my opinions on that, but so Texas was always a frontier that I wanted, and got saturated with Texas music, and still am getting saturated with Texas music. I think it's really enhanced, one, my writing, and two, you just take the filters off when you're writing songs for Texas. And when Bernie Nelson's writing songs for Bernie Nelson, I just don't really have a lot of filters involved anymore. So just whatever I feel like saying, I do.
So it's all about that independent artist feel, essentially. Whatever comes in, you can record now because you're essentially the captain of your own ship now, right?
Yeah, and at the same time, I run back to Nashville and write with these young writers around fire, and we write them, they demo them. I get the phone call saying so-and-so picked it up, and we wait for the check to show up. So,
yeah. And so you did mention a lot about bro country. I won't get too much into that. I think most of us have our opinions and feelings about that. But there is still a niche for the 80s and 90s songwriter in Nashville. And you've even said just now that you're still working there. What has changed from the standpoint of songwriting recently to get away from kind of that cookie cutter Vegematic stuff that you were talking about and getting back more into the subject matter that made the song so great in yesteryear?
I think that, I was at Sony back in November last year, Sony Music, writing with Matt Rogers that wrote Till You Can't, and we turned in a song and they flipped out over it. It was hardcore country, and they brought me in and they said, would you be interested in a publishing deal? They said, our writers don't have original ideas, they don't have 90s feel, and they don't have a hook that's worth a damn. And you have hooks falling out of your head. And so if you were to write with our writers, I think that'd be a really cool thing. So we're talking, I'm talking to some publishing companies back there, but they just finally realized that through the Ashley McBrides and the John Party's songs that were coming out, of course, Stapleton, and it was just time to put, just grown weary of the whole bro country scene and didn't want to hear about painted on jeans and going down to the river and getting drunk. And so original ideas were in great need. So I just happened to, and what's interesting is a lot of the cuts I'm getting right now, both here in Texas and in Nashville, are old songs of mine. They might be 8, 10-year-old songs. Some are even older, that are 90s kind of songs that people really want to grab a hold of right now. So we'll see. And the hardest part is that what I found out about the you would take a writing company like Spirit Music, which is run by Frank Rogers that produced Brad Paisley, and you would take Warner Brothers and Sony. They'd take 3 writers from each company and send them on a retreat. So that's 9 writers. 6 of those writers were actually what you call track writers. All they did was pull their laptops out and create a drum loop and a guitar part and a piano part. The only people that writing the song were like 3 people. And they had to split that song up 9 ways. Actually 18 ways, because the publishers get paid too. So It's insane. So they would have a number 1 that had like 20 million streams, and they'd have to split that up 18 ways. And everybody'd make about 30,000.
Yep.
It's stupid.
It's the same kind of concept when you bring an old song back too, or you try to take like 4 or 5 different songs from back in the day and you're using little snippets from each of those songs. This may not be happening quite as much in country, but it's definitely happening a lot in pop. And I mean, you end up with sometimes as many as 30 different songwriters on it, just because you have all of these different samples from different songs in that one tune now. It's weird.
Yeah, what was the Jelly Roll and Lynch, that Chevrolet, they stole from Drift Away, and then She Had Me at Heads, Carolina, which I thought that was creative. But, to me, the whole Chevrolet thing was annoying, because they had this song and then they just went, hey, let's just use this idea, this melody from Drift Away. Mm-hmm. And that's just a total lack of originality to me. So
I agree. And now you have AI involved as well, which is even worse. I mean, it's just hopefully hopefully that won't happen the way it looks like it's going to happen. But I guess.
Well, I for one would kill to hear a new Ronstadt record, just one. I would just love to hear Ronstadt singing anything new. I mean, I don't want to hear a new Tom Petty song, but if they're past, I don't want to hear something new. But you take somebody like Ronstadt that can't sing. If it was just one song, I think it'd be really cool, but I don't want to see it become the model,
Right.
Because then, we had Pro Tool up the yin yang in the 90s, and you can hear it in the records. But if you go back and listen to Don't Close Your Eyes, you can hear Keith Whitley pitchy in there. And the reason that's there is, 1, they didn't have Pro Tools, and 2, they weren't able to fix it because Keith was gone. Mm. But there's some pitch issues in there, which is awesome. My ears have gotten so good that I listen to old rock and roll now and go, that guitar's out of tune, and it's nice though that it's there. I like the lack of perfection, if you will.
Yeah, the character. That's what we talked to Jerry Phillips recently, son of Sam Phillips, and that's what he was talking about. Just having those little character. He called it character rather than mistakes.
Oh, it is. Old time rock and roll, that's the demo.
Yep.
Funny story about old time rock and roll. One of the writers was writing for Rick Hall, and Rick let him go because he was a drunk and wasn't turning in songs. But Barry Beckett, who was one of the Swampers, piano player, and had a publishing company, he believed in this writer, and he said, look, I'll give you a writer's deal, but I'm only going to pay you when you turn in your songs, and the songs I approve, I'll give you money. One of the guys was living in Memphis, and he couldn't drive because he'd lost his driver's license. So he told his roommate or friend that if you drive me to Muscle Shoals, whatever we write this weekend, I'll put your name on the song. And one of those songs was Old Time Rock and Roll.
Nice. So you
also... Seeger couldn't beat the demo. And Seeger couldn't beat the demo, so they used the demo.
Well, hey, that happens a lot too. I've heard so many demo type stories, or they'll perform in the studio for hours and hours and hours, and then they'll end up taking like the 3rd take or something after like 60 takes. Just keeping all. Elvis was apparently notorious for that. He would sing the same thing over and over again, and then he would pick out the take he wanted just off the top of his head. Like, I want take 7. That was the best one.
I have a copy of Elvis from the board singing Suspicious Minds and learning it, and making mistakes and stuff. But even though they screwed up on the band and he screwed up on lyrics once in a while, his pitch was absolutely perfect. Every note, amazing.
Yeah, it truly is. So you've also written a book, and it's called Honky Tonk Angels: Stories of God's Influence on Nashville's Most Iconic Songs. I'd love to hear where you got the idea for the book, and maybe tell us a little bit about it, other than what's in the title.
Two things. The stories that I would see were amazing. The first story that came to me was I wrote for a company called Screen Gems that would become EMI. And I was hanging out with a guy named Greg Karp, and he wrote for Kiss out in LA. But he was working with a girl named Faith Hill, and he wanted me to have Faith sing some demos for me. So we were hanging out at the front office of Screen Gems when a guy named Michael Bonagera came in, and Michael was in a brand new group called Bailey and the Boys. And they'd had some success, and Michael Bonagera walked in and said, "Are you Craig?" And Craig Karp said, "Yes." So they went upstairs and wrote a song called No Stop in Your Heart that would go on to be a #1 for Marie Osmond, right? And Bonagera's from Pennsylvania. So at the end of the writing session, Michael Bonagera asked Craig Karp, who's from San Francisco, what part of Pennsylvania you're from. And Craig Karp said, "I'm not from Pennsylvania, I'm from San Francisco." And he said, "Oh, I'd heard you were from Pennsylvania." And he said, "You know who's from Pennsylvania is Craig Bickhart." And Bonagera says, "You're not Craig Bickhart?" He said, "No." He thought he was writing with Craig Bickhart, and Craig Karp just happened to be standing there, and his first name was Craig.
That's amazing. So is that where the idea for the book came from? Just that first story?
And that idea actually never got in the book, but there were so many amazing stories. And so I started putting the book together, and Rick Hall was, again, influential in getting me with the publisher that picked up the book. But being a Christian, I really was paying attention to the miracles that Jesus would do. He'd always give thanks before the miracle, not for what he thought was going to happen, but in his belief system, what had already taken place. And I present that in the book, but it's mostly the synergy. It's just unbelievable things had to happen for the songs to happen. Not just to be written, but to get recorded and then to go on to be a hit. People don't know that, on the other hand, Randy Travis died at 52. And 3 singles later, they were out of singles and they had to re-release On the Other Hand, which never happens. Mm-hmm. Stories like that, just crazy.
Yeah, and I've been very blessed to interview a lot of really, really, really good songwriters. And I hear that synergy all the time, and things having to line up or running into somebody you haven't seen in years and end up with a hit with them. It's just all kinds of really magical things happen in the world of songwriting, and it's just really interesting stuff. So again, we're talking with Bernie Nelson, and Bernie, you're, again, very well known for the 80s, 90s style of country music, but now you're also making some of the best Texas music around. You mentioned 7 #1s, plus a slew of your own singles as well. Can you talk about some of the things that make both of these styles of music great, and maybe some of the differences between them from the standpoint of writing? Like, is there a difference in writing for 80s, 90s country versus Texas country?
I would say there is a little bit, because I'm still trying to write that turnpike type of song. I mean, I love that feel and that Old Medicine Crow. I love that feel, and I try to dig into that a little bit more and try to create stuff in that vein, because I was a big fan of the band back in the day and all that type of feel, the dirt band, the band, the rawness of it, if you will, versus a formatted 90s type of song. But the songs that I've had #1s with Case Harden and Kinfo and Kyle Park, they were just songs that I was just delighted that they wanted them. And I brought Kinfo to Texas, and they'd recorded probably 6 of my songs before they came to Texas, and then a few more after that. And they just have exploded. And I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of songs on their records. And Kyle Park and I've been writing a lot and had a number one. And a young kid named Case Hart. I've had 3 number ones now with Case. And it's just doing your homework. It's like anybody else. I mean, I'll go listen to their album and see what they're missing and try to get an idea what's missing and what direction they might want to go. I think I have a single coming out of Matt Castillo this coming year, and a bunch of other new artists that are bringing songs of mine out next year to Texas radio.
And so we've had Case on the show. Kinfo will be on the show in a couple of weeks, not too long after you. I think we're recording with them on October 9th. Kyle Park, never had the pleasure. Matt Castillo's been on the show, so I know all of these artists. It's nice to know that they're cutting your music. I did not know that. I know the first time we talked to Case was his first number one. I had no idea that was your song, so that's pretty cool to know.
Well, his first number one was Alcohol Abuse, and I pitched it to him, and Billy Yates wrote that. Billy Yates wrote Rockin' Chair and Choices. But I heard him do it at a songwriter festival, and I just said, I got to have a copy of that. And I pitched it to Case, and he just loved it. And I said, dude, if you can get all those words in without taking a breath, you go for it. And he did, and that was his first number one. And I had number ones with Honky Tonk Highway and When You Roll That Way, and recently with Just Drive. But I pitched him Stoned, and I think one other song, but he's just such a great kid. And I love artists who don't really want to be songwriters, like Rico, and they just let me pitch them songs. And, I just try to find what they don't have already. And that goes all the way up to Kenny Chesney and Cody Johnson. And I try to fill that hole that they're looking for,
If we have a little more time, I'd love to talk about your current album, which is called Stockyard Cadillac. It's also kind of reminiscent of that '90s vibe, I feel. So I'd love to hear from a studio standpoint. How vocal are you in the process of getting your layers and your instrumentation and stuff like that into the final product of your records?
I have such a great band, and I track in Nashville, and my musicians are Hall of Famers. I mean, they played with George Jones and Marshall Tucker and Waylon Jennings, and they are amazing. And I try to stay out of their way. Stockyard Cadillac, I knew it was going to be Texas Swing, and I was blessed to have Joe Spivey in the studio that day. Spivey played fiddle, wind, and he's part of the Time Jumpers, of course. So he arranged, how that one went down. But every once in a while, I'll think, instead of a dobro, let's go to slide. Instead of a acoustic, let's go to gut string. Let's overdub the B3. On this particular album, I don't think we had any strings at all. But it's just I try to give my input if I'm locked into something. A lot of times, like my guitar player, Mike Durham, I'll say, man, I really think we need a baritone guitar there. And he'll go, oh, I was thinking, and he'll play something just blow me out of the water. I'm like, okay, so I'll just shut up and sit back here. The trick as a producer for me is to not miss anything, because it always sounds great, but it's like getting that bicycle at Christmas, and it's just incredible until you realize that it's not a 10-speed and it doesn't have brakes, and you missed it. So you don't miss anything, because once you're in there, it's kind of hard to get back in there and fix something if the tempo is off, or if the feel just in the end just wasn't right. And I've had a few songs go on records, and in hindsight, I'm like, gosh, we could have done a better version of that. But for the most part, this whole album is amazing. There's a song in there called If Hemingway Had a Guitar.
It's my favorite one on the record, by the way. I love that song.
Unbelievable track. And the other part about this song is after 12 years, I'm finally closing out a thing called Weekend at Bernie's, where I write with people for the weekend, and they pay to come out here and write. And this album is, every song on that record was written at a Weekend at Bernie's. And a lot of them were Stockyard Cadillac. I think there's 5 on there from a veteran. And he brought up Stockyard Cadillac, and he really wanted to talk about the dance halls in Texas and worrying if they would survive, like Music Row went away. So that's where Texas dance halls came from. And of course, he brought out Hemingway's guitar, but there's just some really special songs on this record. I just love it. Texas Cadillac is on there, and but the funny thing was with Stockyard Cadillac, it got picked up by the Stockyard. It's their theme song for all their ads for the next 3-4 years. So
that's always a plus. Yeah, I love If Hemingway Had a Guitar. It's just such a great storytelling song, and that's for me. That's kind of my go-to. I love to hear a story in a song, and it's just man. And that's one of those what if songs, right? Like what if, and so I just love kind of immersing myself into the dream of the song, so to speak.
I've made my bread and butter on story songs and songs that make you feel. I mean, 30 years later, Daddy Never Was a Cadillac Kind. I still have 20-year-old kids come up and tell me it's one of their favorite songs they get to play out, and now recently the song that Winona recorded is back out there. It's Never Easy to Say Goodbye, and after her mom passed, it's a big part of her show, and it's just cool. And I do shows in Nashville, and I'll say, here's a song Crystal Dew recorded, and you could hear a pin drop. Or I'll say, here's a song Conway Twitty recorded, and you could hear a pin drop before we play it. And it's just, they're very, very appreciative of, I guess, what you call old school people like me. So.
And you have afforded us the opportunity of presenting an acoustic version of yourself performing Daddy Never Was the Cadillac Kind. But first, I want to hear the story behind the song and how you guys wrote it. But also, I wanted to point out something that I always found was really interesting about the song, maybe in comparison to some of the other songs that were out at the time, and even today, really. And that's the cadence in your phrasing for that song. Just the flow of the lyrics in that song always kind of flowed differently for me than other songs. Were you aware of that? And if so, was there a strategy behind that?
If you look at the lyrics, they don't fit the melody.
Right.
If you know what I'm saying. I mean, there's a lot of lyrics involved there. And when I teach my songwriting classes, it's one of the songs I use for an example on how not to write a song. Because I'm a big fan of off rhymes versus hard rhymes, but when you rhyme fellas with jealous, that's a bit of a stretch. But
well, that's one of the things I'm talking about. That's the brilliance of the song right there, and that rhyming scheme alone.
And then you got youngin' and hungry. I mean,
yep.
It's just Dave and I wrote the song the first night, and we didn't finish it. And I went to the gym the next day, and somewhere in the middle of my workout, I went, wow. And I just stopped my workout, and I called Gibson. I said, I think I know how we end this song. And he just said, holy crap, get over here. And, I called my dad and asked him if it was okay if we killed him off in the song. But you got to be careful when you write those things, because eventually they'll come back to kick you in the butt. But,
right.
Cadillac was special, and Barry Beckett believed in it. The producer, the label believed in it completely. Rick Blackburn and Al Cooley, the A&R department. But Danny Shirley bought us on it. He just didn't think it was fitting for them, even if after they come off of Jesus and Mom Always Loved Me. I think they were feeling they needed to go into a more rock and southern rock and roll direction. But Danny was getting a divorce, and he was dating one of the Trashettes, who he'd go on to marry. And she said, you really need to cut this song. So when we went over there that day, the studio at Omni, Danny expressed doubts about it fitting for the band. And Barry Beckett said, let's just cut it. And if you don't like what we cut, we'll never go back and play anything other. And Danny asked me if he could change the key in it. So he dropped it from G all the way down to E. And what's been on the radio for the last 30 years is what happened in the last 3 minutes after that conversation. Pretty cool.
Wow. Again, back to the stories we were talking about for your book. This is a good example of that, right? Just kind of the way things line up.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I've had songs where they come in and tell us what they wanted. We wrote it and went to radio within 6 months. And I've had songs. I had a song on Colin Ray's record, but all I knew Colin as was Bubba Ray, because I didn't know Bubba had changed his name to Colin Ray. And I'd been to Skip Ewing's #1 on that song and Gerald Smith's #1 on that album and the double platinum record, and did not know I had a song on the record until Colin called me himself and invited me to the Bluebird for a party. So,
wow.
I didn't know that Bubba Ray was Colin Ray. Hysterical. And he's from he's from Greenville, Texas.
Yeah, not far from where I'm at right now. Actually, about 40 miles up the road, to be fair. Yeah, it's not far at all from where I am. But yeah, we're excited to... Go ahead.
Scotty, his brother Scotty Ray grew up with Miranda and was his guitar player for years. So
yeah. I'm gonna have to look into Colin. I bet you he's still still around these parts from time to time. I bet
he tours with Aaron Tippin and Sammy Kershaw now.
Okay. But yeah, we're excited to show a live acoustic version of the one and only Bernie Nelson, not Bernie Sanders, doing Daddy Never Was the Cadillac Kind. Y'all check it out.
We were poor when I was a youngin'. Don't remember ever going hungry. Daddy made sure we didn't do without. Went to school with some of these fellas that had money, and I was jealous, and I didn't know then what I know now. Daddy say you can't judge a book by looking at the cover. It's what's inside really matters. Daddy never was a Cadillac kind, and said some things just glitter and shine. He taught us that love, it was the one thing money couldn't buy. And Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. I left home right out of high school, got me a big car and thought I was real cool, cruising around the neighborhood. See Daddy after church on Sundays, he'd say you have to go riding with me someday. He just said no, I never understood. And he asked me how I bought it, I told him on credit, and Daddy just smiled, I'll never forget it. And Daddy never was the Cadillac kind, and said some things they just glitter and shine. Taught us that love, it was the one thing money couldn't buy. Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. Took a while, but now I'm grown and settled down, kids of my own, and the more I give them, well, the more they want. Daddy left us last November. Don't remember him ever looking better, all laid out in his Sunday best. Sure, instead of all that attention, all he'd wanted was a few words mentioned. A simple man simply laid to rest. As they drove him away in that big Cadillac, with a tear in my eye, and I had to laugh. Daddy never was a Cadillac kind, and said some things just glitter and shine. But just that one time, I bet Daddy enjoyed that ride. Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. My daddy never was the Cadillac kind. My daddy drove a semi-truck 6 days a week. When he was home and hanging around, he liked to drive his old pickup truck down dirt roads. It was me and my brother's job to drive Daddy crazy.
All right, so we are back. Bernie has just picked up his guitar. I'm a little afraid. You're not going to write a song about me, are you? I'm afraid.
No, I was going to tell you, I was in the dentist office one day, and back in the day, there were two Bernies in Nashville. Me and Bernie Ledden from the Eagles.
Yep.
And I went in to have a cleaning, and the girl opened the door, and she said, "Bernie, are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was a dental assistant I didn't know, and she took me back, and she started numbing my teeth. And I said, "What are we doing?" She said, "He's going to come in and give you a shot to numb your teeth and stuff." I said, "I think there's something wrong here. I'm just supposed to get in a cleaning." And she said, "Well, I got you in for a filling." And I said, "No." And so she pulled up. She said, "Well, you're Bernie Ledden, right?" And I said, "No." And so I walked out in the lobby, and there was Bernie. And I said, "Dude, you almost cost me a tooth for crying out loud." You know?
What are the chances of both of y'all being there? So how quick were you like, "Oh, I wish I was Bernie Ledden," until you're taking my tooth, right?
Ledden was actually in Run W, going back to Russell Smith. Have you ever listened to them?
Who was it now? The CW?
Run CW was Vince Malamet and Bernie Ledden, and there's my brain. The guy that wrote Fishing in the Dark.
Jim Fatso.
That was my brain. Right? So Photoglow, and they did Motown songs, bluegrass style.
Okay.
It's a classic album. You have to pull up Run CW. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. I'm definitely going to have to check them out after we're done, for sure.
Oh, amazing.
Awesome. So I got a couple more questions if you got a little more time.
Go right ahead.
Oh, perfect. So you did talk about advice for songwriters earlier. I definitely wanted to talk about that a little bit. Obviously, a very accomplished songwriter. You've been an indie songwriter in Texas with a lot of success. A professional songwriter in Nashville, published as well. So a lot of perspective in this. So what would be your best advice for a young songwriter? If they came up to you and said, if I could take one morsel from Bernie Nelson, what would it be?
It goes back to what Russell told me, that upstairs in that little back bedroom is where I did my homework and I learned to play guitar. That's just conversation. It's not a lyric. It's just a conversation, you know. And you look at the greatest songs out there, Broken Halo and Eric Church's Springsteen. They're just conversations, you know. Girl Going Nowhere. I mean, The House That Built Me. They're not. It's not poetry. So if you're trying to write poetry, you're wasting your time. But if you just say, you know, when we were poor, you know, we were poor when I was young, and you know, but I don't remember ever going hungry. That's just conversation, you know. And in a song of mine, Shamlin and I wrote for Winona, "It's Never Easy to Say Goodbye." Jimmy climbed on board that big yellow bus. He sure looks big in his little eyes. That's just conversation. And Alan Shamlin wrote, he wore a starched white shirt, buttoned at the neck, his teeth were all gone, but what the heck, I thought he walked on water. If you try to write poetry, you're going to miss the art of writing songs. So it's just conversation. And a lot of times conversation will lead to a great idea for a song too. So
over, 50 years in the business. And I think we all as humans have what I call "I can't believe I'm here" moments. So what were some of those for you? Like, man, I can't believe what's happening to me right now.
You know, the night that Randy Travis and Christopherson recorded my song, that was a big deal. I wrote a song with Jimmy Fadden from the Dirt Band, and Jeff and Jimmy explained to me the band was breaking up and they were going to cut a record, but it was their last record. And so Jimmy Fadden and I wrote a song called "The Dream," about a cowboy that gets to live his dream even though he's way past his prime. He still gets to cowboy, and a baseball player who's down in the minors, but he's way past his prime, but he still gets to play baseball every day. And about a band playing music way past their blue jean days, and they should probably grow up and get a job, but they love playing music. So they were in Alberta doing a show, and Jimmy Ibbotson suggested they close the show with that and did it acoustically. So they started closing their shows with it.
Wow. And
they announced on Nashville Now one night that song decided to make them stay together. So that was a big deal for me.
Wow.
You know, I just recently got a Willie Nelson cut. that was a watershed mark for me. I still have some bucket list stuff out there, George Strait. I have a bucket list cut to get a Willie Nelson and Keith Richards cut, and I'm actually working on it. I'm getting closer every day. So I have the song. We just got to get it finished, and I wrote it with Willie's producers, so hopefully we can get it done in time. So.
Oh, that would be amazing. I hear this from songwriters all the time, where they'll hear a song, whether it's a demo or a work tape or maybe something that's polished and produced and it's out there, and they hear the song and they say, I wish I would have wrote that one. Is there a song out there that you've in the past where you were like, man, I should have wrote that song, what is wrong with me, that kind of thing?
Blues Man, hands down. It's just, I'm just a singer, it's such a great song from Hank Jr. and it just resonates with me so much. I've been cuffed on dirt roads, I've been busted for no shows, and hey baby, I love you. It wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made it. And it's such a testimony to songwriters and singers. So that I would say between that one and Rodney Crowell's Till I Gain Control Again, those are probably my all-time favorite songs I wish I'd written.
And in the same vein, I ask pretty much every guest that I have what their Mount Rushmore is of a certain thing. I'm going to ask you what your Mount Rushmore for songwriters is. If you could put 4 songwriters up on your Mount Rushmore, who would they be? And you only get to pick 4.
Billy Joe Shaver, Rodney Crowell, Guy Clark, and Alan Shanlin.
Well, that was a lot quicker than I expected.
Yeah, well,
how many of those? I know
blessed.
you co-wrote with Alan. Did you have any history with the other 3 as well?
Guy and I were great drinking buddies, and Billy Joe and I tore up a bar one night. But Rodney, I've only met him a couple times. He put one of my songs, he put my Willie Nelson cut on his Quarantine record, and I got to thank him for that recently for that. But Rodney and Shanlin have the new Willie Nelson title track, The Border. Just amazing song.
Incredible song.
Just yes, incredible song. But Rodney's such a force to be reckoned with, and This Ain't Over Yet spawned me to write a song while driving around Texas one day called It Took a Lot of Life for Me to Write This Song. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to put that song on a record someday. It just talks about all the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and your mistakes, your ups and downs, and regret and all that stuff. And it just says, I don't know if the rights outweigh the wrongs, but it sure took a lot of life for me to write this song, And I think that song will hopefully be played at my memorial. It's just one of them songs that just kind of sums my life up. So.
And just in reference to The Border as well, I have to throw this out there. I don't know if you knew him or met him or whatever, but we had a great songwriter from East Texas, the Kilgore area, named Will Jennings. I'm sure you know the name. Will is just a phenomenal talent. Just recently passed away, but he also has a cut on The Border called Many a Long and Lonesome Highway that he did with Rodney Crowell. Just a great tune.
Yeah, he and Marshall Chapman wrote a bunch of stuff with Buffett, and just an amazing songwriter. And then we just lost J.D. Souther too, which is I got to hang with J.D. a lot in Nashville, and huge fan of J.D. Souther.
I don't know if you heard, but today I'm going to look to make sure so I don't get this wrong. But I just read this prior to coming on the air with you. Hugh Prestwood passed away today or yesterday.
Well, he was on my mind. I was thinking he's probably, because I'd heard he was in bad health, but he was so great. I mean, just an incredible guy, and he was always kind to me, always complimentary of my music. And then Waylon Holyfield, oh my gosh. Waylon took me under his wing, and he and I and Nora Holyfield or Nora Wilson got to write. Waylon wrote Some Broken Hearts Never Mend. All these huge Don Williams songs. He wrote Can I Have This Dance for the Rest of Your Life? And just amazing people I was around. The Red Lanes and the Wayne Carsons and the Hank Cochrans. And we were just walking among giants back then. And Harlan and Troy Seals, Max D. Barnes, and I had a phone call. Go ahead.
Do you feel like that mentorship might be missing nowadays? Because we talked about it earlier in the show, where you came up with all these great people that were ahead of you that kind of, handed you down these tidbits that you learned and these morsels of information that you essentially created a phenomenal songwriter out of. Do you feel like that mentorship is not there anymore? Maybe that's why some of that feel is missing now?
I think the ones that are succeeding, I think that they do acknowledge those that came before him. But I was at Spirit Music last month with Jeremy Bussey and Alan Shamlin. We were writing. And there were like 5 or 6 writers. They're all high-fiving each other and beating their chest about their latest song and all this stuff. And Alan came in, and I said, "Y'all know Alan Shamlin?" And they said, "Man, how you doing?" I wanted to slap them all in the head.
Yeah.
So this guy has written a library of songs that you can't even fathom.
Yeah.
You grew up on his music. We're the Blacktop Band's Life's a Dance, Don't Laugh at Me. I Can't Make You Love Me. It's been recorded 500 times. And here you are, you don't even know this man's in the room. Shame, shame, shame. I mean, I was really proud of my history of songwriters, and just to get around, the Dickie Lees and the Harlan Howards, and Red Lane was one of my buddies, and we would write, and Wayne Carson was probably my closest icon. I mean, Wayne was just so incredible to me. So
yeah, and there's a wealth of information there, and those songs that worked then are working now. I mean, you are a testament to that. You are a singular testament to that. I imagine it's happening to other songwriters as well, where what is once old is new again. Just real quick before I get into the what's next for you in the future, you talked about having songs that were 8 or 10 years old that are kind of being picked up and cut again today. Is there any kind of polish that you have to put on those songs to make them resonate more to a current audience that maybe wasn't there 10 years ago when you wrote them?
There's a few songs that have timestamps on them that don't work anymore. But if I really think the song still got a shot, I'll go in and retrack it and take that timestamp out,
Yeah.
But if I lose you here, I'm down to 5% on my phone. I just realized that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I
well,
forgot
that's
to
okay.
charge it up.
I'm pretty much on the last one anyway. What's next for you? What's in the future for you? What's coming up?
Back to Nashville for the last time for the year. I got a bunch of solo shows coming up. Doing some stuff with Michael Martin Murphy, and just doing a lot of solo shows, and winding down for the year, and looking forward to some time on the back porch and reflecting on how the year went. So,
and the website is BernieNelson.com, or is it BernieNelsonMusic.com?
No, BernieNelson.com. The website's horrendous right now, but it's being rebuilt. Okay. And we'll have all the year dates up and stuff, and all the new music, and all the merch will be out there. They can get my book, Honky Tonk Angels, through BernieNelson.com. I stick them in the mail as soon as they hit the PayPal, and it's been one of my greatest things. I love that book. It's been a very special thing for me.
Yeah, I'll definitely be in contact. I definitely want to pick one of those up. I just got Steve Dorff's book. I'm interviewing him in a week. I can't wait for that, man. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve.
He's a great guy, yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait.
And Andrew was a great writer, too.
Absolutely, he was. But yeah, thank you so much again, Bernie. Bernie Nelson, not Sanders. Guys, make sure you...
Ledden.
Yeah, or Ledden, because he still has that tooth, and Bernie Ledden does not.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time today, Bernie. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you, Boston, and I'll talk to you soon. Send me your address. I'll send you the book.
I sure will.
Hey, guys, this is Clint Offord. Thank you guys so much for watching the Boston Chris Show.